Hello, and welcome to our first SAT reading walkthrough. In these walkthroughs, we will go over the SAT reading passages and provide you with quality explanations for the answers. We'll first start off with the 10th practice test that was released on the College Board website. Before watching this, I first recommend you guys to try and solve the problems on your own first. And then you can reference back to this if you're confused with some questions. Now, let's tackle the first reading passage of practice test 10. This passage is adapted from Mary Helen Steinfeld, The Caliphs of Baghdad, Georgia, a novel, 2010 by Mary Helen Stefaniak. Miss Grace Spivey arrived in Three-Step, Georgia in August 1938. She stepped off the train wearing a pair of thick-soled boots suitable for hiking, a navy blue dress, and a little white tam that rode the waves of her red hair at a gravity-defying angle. August was a hellish month to step off the train in Georgia, although it was nothing, she said, compared to the 119 degrees that greeted her when she arrived one time in Timbuktu, which she assured us was a real place in Africa. I believe her remark irritated some of the people gathered to welcome her on the burned grass alongside the tracks. When folks are sweating through their shorts, they don't like to hear that this is nothing compared to someplace else. Irritated or not, the majority of these present were inclined to see the arrival of the new school teacher in a positive light. Hard times were still upon us in 1938, but like my mama said, we weren't no poorer than we'd ever been before, and the citizens of Three Steps were in the mood for a little excitement. Miss Spivey looks like just the right person to give it to them. She was, by almost anyone's standards, a woman of the world. She'd gone to boarding school since she was 6 years old. She studied French in Paris and drama in London, and during what she called a fruitful intervention in her formal education, she had traveled extensively in the Near East and Africa with a friend of her grandmother's, one Janet Miller, who was a medical doctor from Nashville, Tennessee. After her travels with Dr. Miller, Miss Spivey continued her education by attending Barnard College in New York City. She told us all that at school the first day. When my little brother, Ralphford, asked what did she study at Barnard College, Miss Spivey explained that Barnard, which she wrote on the blackboard, was the sister school of Columbia University, of which she expected we all had heard. It was there, she told us, in the midst of trying to find her true mission in life, that she wandered one afternoon into a lecture by the famous John Dewey, who was talking about his famous book, Democracy and Education. Professor Dewey was in his 70s by then, and Miss Spivey said, but still he still liked to chat with students after the lecture, especially female students, she added, sometimes over coffee, and sees in their eyes the fire his words could kindle. It was after this lecture and subsequent coffee that Miss Spivey has marched to the Teachers College and signed up, all aflame. 2 years later, she told a cherry blue student woman from the WPA that she wanted to bring democracy and education to the poorest, darkest, most remote, and forgotten corner of America. They sent her to Three-Step, Georgia. Miss Spivey paused there for questions, avoiding my brother's, Ralphford's, eye. What we really wanted to know about, all 26 of us across 7th grade levels in one room, was the purely white button hanging on a string in front of the blackboard behind the teacher's desk up front. That button on a string was something new. When Mavis Davis, the only bona fide 7th grader at age 13, asked what it was for, Miss Spivey gave the string a tug, and to our astonishment, the whole world, or at least a wrinkled map of it, unfolded before our eyes. Her predecessor, Miss Chandler, has never once made use of that map, which was older than our father's, and until that moment, not a one of us knew it was there. Miss Spivey showed us on the map how she and Dr. Janet Miller had sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and passed the Rock of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean Sea. Using the end of a ruler, she gently tapped such places as Morocco and Tunis and Algiers to mark the route along the top of Africa. They spent 20 hours on the train to Baghdad, she said, swathed in veils against the sand that crept in every creek and crevice. And can you guess what we saw from that train? Miss Spivey asked. We could not. Camels, she said. We saw a whole caravan of camels. She looked across the room, waiting for us to be amazed and delighted at the thought. We all hung there for a minute, thinking hard until Mavis Davis spoke up. She means like the 3 kings that rode to Bethlehem, Mavis said, and she folded her hands smugly on her 7th grade desk. in the back of the room. Miss Spivey made a mistake right then. Instead of beaming upon Mavis the kind of congratulatory smile that old Miss Chandler would have bestowed on her for having enlightened the rest of the class, Miss Spivey simply said, "That's right." Alright, now let's move on to the questions. Question 1. The narrative of the passage can be described as A. One of Miss Spivey's former students, B. Miss Spivey's predecessor, C. Anonymous member of this community, and D. Miss Spivey's herself. Well, from this, we can clearly see that the answer is A. This is the correct answer because if you remember correctly, the narrative repeatedly refers to Miss Spivey's class as us and we. The narrative also goes on to describe how Miss Spivey interacted with her students in first person. Therefore, this shows that the narrative was one of Miss Spivey's former students. So let's look at why B is not the correct answer. So B is not correct because the narrative does not refer to Miss Chandler as who is Miss Spivey's predecessor by I or me. So therefore, B cannot be the answer to the question. So why is C wrong? So C, anonymous member of the community. So many of you may have chosen answer choice C. However, this option is wrong because the passage mentions that the narrative's mother and little brother, Ralford. Finally, choice D, Miss Spivey herself. Choice D is incorrect because there is no evidence in the passage that the narrative used I or me. If it was indeed written by Miss Spivey, chances are that she would use I or me. So the correct answer is A. Let's move on to question 2. In the passage, 3-step is mainly presented as A. Summer retreat or vacation for vacationers, B. Small rural town, C. Town that is home to a prominent university, and D. Comfortable suburb. Alright, so let's first eliminate choice A because the narrative does not describe 3-step as a summer retreat for vacationers. This is because the narrative says that 3-step was very hot for its residents. So let's eliminate A. Also, we can scroll back up to line 5 where it says, August was a hellish month to step off the train in Georgia. This further shows that 3-step was rather hot than a summer retreat. So therefore A cannot be the answer. B. A small rural town. Yes, I think this might be the correct answer. This is because the passage does talk about how 3-step is pretty much in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. It also talks about later on in the passage how there are 7 grade levels, but there are only 26 students across these grade levels. Alright, let's look at C. A town that is home to a prominent university. Alright, C is incorrect because the passage does talk about prominent universities, but they talked about it being located elsewhere in other big cities rather than 3-step. And D, a comfortable suburb. Comfortable suburb is also wrong because the first paragraph talks about how hard it is to live in 3-step and that it is a poverty. Alright, let's move on to question 3. It can be reasonably inferred from the passage that some of these people at the train station regard Miss Spivey's comment about Georgia heat with A. Sympathy, because they assume that she is experiencing intense heat for the first time, B. Disappointment, because they doubt that she would stay in 3-step for very long, C. Embarrassment, because they imagine that she is superior than them, and D. Resentment, because they feel that she is minimizing their discomfort. Well, let's first eliminate answer choice A. Let's eliminate them. This is because on the first passage, Miss Spivey actually talks about how she has endured climates that were more intense than the hot temperatures in 3-step, as she talked about the climate being 190 Fahrenheit in Timbuktu. Alright, choice B. Choice B is also incorrect because there's no actual evidence from the passage that shows that Miss Spivey actually intended to stay in 3-step for a short period of time. So let's cross that out. C. Embarrassment, because they imagine that she is superior to them. Well, from then, we can also eliminate choice C. This is because the passage does not show that the people were embarrassed, that they were less superior than Miss Spivey. So the only correct answer here is D. Resentment, because they feel that she is minimizing their discomfort. Well, this is shown through the first paragraph when she talks about the heat in Georgia being nothing compared to what she experienced in Timbuktu. Resentment is shown in the following lines, where we can scroll up, where the narrative says, I believe Her remark irritated some of the people gathered to welcome her on the burned glass alongside the tracks. When folks are sweating through their shorts, they don't like to hear that this is not being compared to someplace else. So therefore, the correct answer is D. Alright. Question 4. So this one we have to provide evidence for why it is D. Why it is D. Alright. So let's read all of the lines first. Line 2 to 5. She stepped off the train wearing a pair of thick-soled boots suitable for hiking, a navy blue dress, and a little white can that rode the waves of her red hair in a gravity-defying angle. Alright. That doesn't show anything about resentment. That actually just described what Miss Spivey was wearing, so let's eliminate choice A. Choice B, line 10 to 14. I believe her remark irritated some of the people gathered to welcome her. Alright, so this talks about what I was talking about. Because it was talking about resentment, how the people were angry that she talked about how this weather in Georgia did not compare to the weather in Timbuktu. So therefore the answer B is correct. Alright. And let's look at C and D just in case. C 1420. Irritated or not, the majority of those people present were inclined to see the arrival of the new teacher in a positive light. Hard times were still upon us in 1938, but like my mom said, we weren't no poorer than we'd ever been, and the citizens of Three Step were in the mood for a little excitement. Alright, this is long because it reflects on how white people viewed her positively, so it doesn't actually show resentment. And finally, let's look at D, line 23 to 25. She'd gone to boarding school since she was 6 years old. She studied French in Paris and drama in London. Alright, so this only outlines her education. It doesn't really show resentment. So the only correct answer here is B. Let's move on to question 5. Miss Spivey most likely uses the phrase fruitful information, line 26, to indicate that A. She benefited from taking time off her studies in order to travel. B. Her travels with Janet Miller encouraged her to start medical school. C. Her early years at boarding schools resulted in unanticipated rewards. And finally D. What she thought that it would be a short break from school lasted several years. Alright, so many of you could guess that choice A is the correct answer because it's the most appropriate, and that is correct. B is wrong because there is no evidence that she wanted to start medical school, but there's evidence that she traveled along with Janet Miller. C is also wrong because line 26 talks about her travels, right? So C should not be correct. And D, there's also no evidence for D that she wanted a short break. Right, so the answer is A. The interaction between Miss Spivey and Walford serves mainly to A. suggest that Miss Spivey has an exaggerated view of what information should be considered common knowledge. Alright, so I personally think A is correct. This is because we can scroll back up. Let's see. Yep, here. It shows that she has not an accurate view of what people know because she assumes that most of the people already heard of Columbia University, which is a prestigious university if you didn't know. So, answer choice A should be most likely correct. Let's look at the other answer choices in case. B. Establish a friendly dynamic between the charming school children and the indulgent and doting new instructor. Well, B is wrong because we don't really know about the friendly dynamic. It's actually not discussed in the passage, so we can eliminate B. C. Introduce Ralford as a precocious young student and Miss Spivey as a dismissive and a disinterested teacher. Well, this is also wrong because there's no evidence that Miss Spivey was dismissive and disinterested. D. Demonstrate that the children want to amuse Miss Spivey with their questions. Well, only one question did ask Miss Spivey a question about the camels, so therefore this is wrong. Alright, let's go to question 7. In the third paragraph, what is the narrator most likely suggesting by describing Miss Spivey as having wandered? Line 40 in one situation and March in another situation. Let's go to line 40 and 49. And let's read. It was there she told us, convinced of trying to find her true mission in life, that she wandered one afternoon into a lecture by the famous John Dewey, who was talking about his famous book, Democracy and Education. Professor Dewey was in his 70s by then, when Miss Spivey said, but she still liked his talk with students after a lecture, especially female students, he added, sometimes over coffee and seeing in their eyes the fires his words could kindle. It was after this lecture and subsequent coffee that Miss Spivey has marched to the Teachers College and signed up. All flame. Alright. So, A. Dewey, knowing Miss Spivey wasn't very confident in her ability to teach, instilled in her a sense of determination. Okay, we should eliminate this because she didn't know that she wanted to teach at first with her interaction with Dewey. So let's eliminate answer choice A. B. Talking with Dewey over coffee made Miss Spivey realize how excited she was to teach in the poorest, most remote corner of America. That doesn't really fit in our word choices, which is wandered and marched. So B is incorrect as well. C. After 2 years spent studying, Miss Spivey was anxious to start teaching and be in charge of her own classroom. There's also no evidence of this, and it was also an accident that she started teaching. So therefore C is wrong. So our only option is D. Miss Spivey's initial encounter with Dewey ideas was somewhat accidental, but ultimately motivated her to decisive action. Yes, D is correct. Question 8. According to the passage, Miss Spivey ended up on 3-step as a direct result of A. her friendship with Janet Miller, B. attending college in New York City, talking with a woman at WPA. Okay, this is correct. Yep, WTA is correct. This is because Miss Spivey asked the woman at the WPA where the place that needed her the most, and which the WPA woman replied 3 steps. So this is the only correct answer here. Number 9. In the passage where Miss Spivey announces that she had seen camels, the students' reaction suggests that they are delighted, fascinated, baffled, worried, baffled. The students are not really sure what to think of if we go back to the questions, but I'll go back in a sec because the answer is probably in question 10, which is providing best evidence for the answer to the previous question. So let's go over the options here. Line 82 to 84. We saw a whole caravan of camels. She looked around the room, waiting for us to be amazed and delighted at the thought. Well, this is wrong because it just shows how she has an anticipation of having an amazed response to her declaration that she has seen camels, which is actually not showing that. Which doesn't actually show that her students were baffled or discombobulated. So let's remove A from the answer choices. Let's look at B, 85 to 86. We all hung up for a minute, thinking hard until Mavis Davis spoke up. Alright, B is correct, because it showed that they were baffled because they sat in silence for a minute until Mavis Davis spoke up. So the correct answer is definitely B. Alright, so we solved our first passage for SAT practice test number 10. And if you want more coming, please do comment down below. And yeah, thank you for watching. And check out our resources on edequity.ph.org for more practice tests and worksheets and question banks. We'll continue to upload them. And alright, take care.